Okay. Also happens. So we think we're going to have a little chat tonight about our motivation. The Tibetans would say, set your motivation for what you're doing. We might say, state our purpose. So I think it's what it means, really. What's our purpose for being together tonight? Well, we're going to think about a few ideas coming from the Buddha about life, happiness, these things, his methods, basically. His methods. See if there's any advice that is useful to us. And then if we decide to, if we like it, try and put it into practice. That's it. It's a totally personal thing, it's action. It's like action, not a question of just believing something. It's doing something. It's practical advice. Practical advice. So we think we're going to listen for this reason, so we can become better human beings, more content, more fulfilled, and then on the basis of this, more useful to others, because we all live in this crazy world together. Sangye Cherang Soke Chognam La Janchu Baru Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chernyan Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Drupa Shog Sangye Cherang Soke Chognam La Janchu Baru Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chernyan Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Drupa Shog Sangye Cherang Soke Chognam La Janchu Baru Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chonyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penche Sangi Drupa Shog. So I suppose happiness is such a simple word, isn't it? And I know when you hear all these different, many people write about it, and I think there are probably 50 different definitions of it. Or people actually don't even say definitions of it, but 50 different types of happiness. You understand? Thanks, Shiva. But let's look at what Buddha means by it. It's like, it's sort of like very clear, really. And then his methods of how to get it. So what's interesting, if we've read any Buddhist books at all, we'll know the very first teaching that the Buddha gave after he went through his own process, his first teaching was how to stop suffering. But you just flip it over, it means how to get happy. It means that. So of course his is long-term. It's a long-term approach. It's like how to get rich. It takes a while. It's a process. How to get a beautiful garden with 50-foot trees. It takes time. It's a lot. So we've got to think in those terms, although we don't like to. It's a long-term approach. It's a long-term approach. But there's a short-term application of it. So the essential point of the Buddha, this is where, he's in many ways fundamentally different from our usual approach to life. And what I mean by that is our usual approach to life seems to be, that happiness and indeed suffering are mainly caused by something out there. I mean, it's pretty much the way we think, I think the way we live our lives. And it seems fairly much like that. It would seem this way. Someone says a mean word to you, which is outside you, it instantaneously triggers an unhappy feeling. So it seems logical to say that person's unhappy, mean words caused me suffering. And if someone says sweet words, it's the opposite. You can see that in general. You taste this nice cake, it triggers a happy feeling. These are facts, and Buddha doesn't disagree with that. So if it's only a short-term thing we're wanting, then of course the sensory way is the quickest way to go. Get good objects of the senses. But Buddha's warning us, I mean, he doesn't say it like this, but I am. If you want to go that approach and take the view that happy feelings do come from getting contact with nice sensory objects, he doesn't disagree. But his main point is, you've got to notice it won't last. It won't last. So you have to do it again. And in fact, if we look at our lives without analysis, without questioning what is happiness, and without questioning this approach, which is a very instinctive approach, everybody has it, the animals do the same thing. Buddha would call it following attachment, based on the senses. So he's not saying so it's naughty to get a nice cake. You're naughty to get a nice feeling if you have a nice boyfriend. He's not saying that. although we hear it that way. We hear it in a very fundamentalist way. He's just saying it won't last. So then we think, well, okay, even if we think, well, okay, we know that, so what? We're happy to take the cake again. I'm happy to get the boyfriend again. I'm happy to get the job again. But things don't last, not according to our plan, you know. One day you're sick and you eat the same cake as you ate yesterday and it makes you vomit. So what he points out from the very beginning, what Buddha points out, in fact, this is a more subtle level of suffering he talks about. The simple kind of suffering is when you get the lousy cake, isn't it? The mean boyfriend. That's what we call by suffering. And then when you get the nice boyfriend or the nice cake, that's what we mean by happiness. But he's got this whole approach. And let's discuss this. This is really getting deeper into his view. He says it's this one of, you know, this what we call happiness, the approach of following the senses, getting a nice thing, getting a thing that triggers a nice feeling. Even as long term, even if you think, oh, I'm going to build a new house. So it takes you 5 years, hard work, exhausting, but you're anticipating the final delicious house and the happiness that will come. So we do have long-term views, but he's even saying with that, it's not stable. Basically, he's saying it's not stable. And then he says, when you start to really look into that one, you're going to find you will get happy after that piece of cake. But if you really follow it logically, and a piece of cake is a good example, because the happy feelings do come, but they're very short-lived. Because what you're going to find if you start looking more deeply into the mind, and this is where we have to really do the analysis at a level of real inner awareness, you know. The happy feeling does come, but even as it comes, even as the first moment of the happy feeling from the first taste of the cake does come, even as you're having it, you're already dissatisfied. You're already dissatisfied. It didn't even last a moment. That's why you have a second mouthful. We don't notice it like that. We just think of it, oh, enjoying cake, you know. But if you start to do the analysis, start to really do it in a really clear, and that's what he means by meditating on. We need to meditate on, really look at it carefully. Do analysis at a deeper level. You're going to notice, even this is a fairly gross level. I mean, all the holy beings say that when you see it at a more subtle level, it's only suffering. It is only suffering, but looking like happiness on the face of it. So it's not a moralistic issue for the Buddha. It's a practical one. It's a practical issue. And here's all he's saying. And all this is in reference to his his long-term view, which is the Buddha's approach is that our mind, our consciousness, he doesn't mean our brain, he's meaning our subjective cognitive process itself. And that's the radical difference in Buddhism. If we compare with the materialist view, his view of what the mind even is, you know. He says it's not physical. It is not directly a function of the brain. It's interdependently functioning in relation to the brain. It's interdependently functioning in relation to the body, but it's not in its nature physical. And this is a dramatic difference. And you've got to look into that because it's not evident on the face of it. But all of Buddha's teachings are based on this assumption. And where that assumption comes from is his own personal, direct experiential observations, you know, that the mind isn't physical. So his view is from his own direct experience, this is the long-term picture in Buddhism, in Buddhist psychology, that the mind has the natural potential to be happy, to stop suffering, to be happy. And in a simple sense, this happiness he's referring to is some kind of profound kind of satisfaction. It sounds a boring word. Satisfied sounds like lazy, you know. But I mean, he really does mean joy. The happiness Buddha would say our mind is capable of is like insanely more delicious than we could ever imagine. And it really, and that's why I find that rather encouraging. If you read the Buddhist teachings and you read the experiences of the great yogis, it's extremely different from how we think in the world. There's no, you know, no neuroscientist has a view that your brain has the potential to be blissfully happy all the time. That sounds wacky, you know. That's what Buddha's saying. That's what he's saying. And that's what he means by nirvana. That's what he literally means. When you've accomplished nirvana, the very first level of experience, there's more to go. You have experienced the cessation of suffering. And therefore you are experiencing and can only experience, because this is now stable, happy feelings, joyful feelings. The joy is our natural state. This is not how we think in the world, you know. Modern views do not think that way. So it's radically different. And he's not talking about being in heaven or something. He's not discussing that. He's talking about the very nature of our mind, you know. So that's encouraging. That's long term. That's long term, and all his methodology leads to that. If you're interested in being a Buddhist and you're following the path, then it will lead to that. And indeed, it might not be in this life, because he says your mind continues after you die. So in this way, he's very different, you know. But how can we apply this now? How can we get some benefit now? And I think we can. And this leads us to understand very clearly his methodology, his fundamental method for how to get that happiness. And this is related to his observation, his presentation of the contents of our mind. You know, that within the mind, we have, really three categories of states of mind. The first lot are the neurotic, I-based, ego-based, fear-based, unhappy, delusional, many, many words can refer to them. States of mind called attachment, anger, jealousy, low self-esteem. And these are simple words, but they're multifaceted. And as we go deeper and deeper inside, using this approach, you get to ever more subtle levels of these very states of mind, you know. So another way of talking about the mind, we have sensory consciousness, and it's really important. If we want to understand Buddhism, it's really important to understand this distinction, you know. We've got sensory consciousness, which is the most immediately evident to us, available to us. And that demands it. And that's why we can have immediate satisfaction for a moment, you know, immediate feelings of pleasure or pain. And then we have mental consciousness, and that's the long-term one. That's the more profound level. That's the source of who we are. The senses are real, but they're very superficial in a way. So even distinguishing between these two is already really helpful if we want to try and use Buddhism as our method for developing our mind, you know. So it's very telling, really, the way Buddhism describes how they function. So I use the same example, you know. I say, I look over here, you see my eyes go here. And then I say to you, that's a very pretty cup, let's say. So we all just assume, don't we, that my eye consciousness, well, we mightn't say it, that we just say our eyes, which means the physical, but that even for the Buddha is not what's happening. There is eye consciousness. This word is synonymous with the word mind. And it functions in the terms of the senses, and it functions in terms of thoughts and feelings and emotions, which is the mental consciousness. So the sensory consciousness is the part of my mind that functions through the medium of the physical, the eyeball and all the other bits and pieces, all working together nicely. So then my eyes go there. So we think my eyes see a pretty cup. It's not possible. The sensory consciousnesses for the Buddha, they go into great detail about it, are very limited, are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. The job of our mind is to cognize things, to be aware of things, to know things. These words are synonymous. So what's happening is we think, I see a pretty cup. They talk about the mind always being the subject, and whatever it cognizes is the object. So the object we're thinking the object that I'm seeing is a pretty cup. Not possible, because the senses are really limited. The eye consciousness can only cognize two things: shape and color. Sort of like the senses have no intelligence. Think of it like that. That's a way of saying it. They're very limited. Ear consciousness can only hear mere sound. So it's obvious then we have to ask the question, well, which part of my mind is cognizing a pretty cup? Well, that's your mental consciousness. As Lama Zopa says, that's where the workshop is. That's where all your thoughts and feelings and the dramas and emotions and happiness and sadness and bliss and joy and intelligence and confidence, all of that stuff. That's the stuff of our mental consciousness. And that's where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa says. And that's what we have, as a Buddhist, you have to know this with incredible intimacy. at ever more subtle levels, and unpack and unravel, unpack and unravel, unpack and unravel the contents of our mental consciousness. Why? Because that's where the neuroses are. That's where, therefore, the suffering is, and the happiness. So what happens is the I consciousness goes there, and I'm not kidding, quicker than Google, my mental consciousness will be accessed, where my memory is. Everything, and Buddha would say everything can do and say doesn't go astray, is stored in our memory. And I don't mean our brain. You can say like that, but I'm talking the Buddhist view, which is your consciousness, and I'm talking about past lives. We've got trillions of past lives and therefore trillions of experiences, but they're all buried. We don't remember 99% of today. Forget about a past life. What a joke. Forget about the rest of this life. What a joke. Because our grosser level, we're living at a very gross level of our mental consciousness. Buddha would assert these much more subtle levels of mental consciousness that we can only access when we learn to get shamatha, single point of concentration, this genius technique these genius Indians invented 3,000 years ago. It's a central technique in Buddhism. And that's where he's radically different too. There's no such level of consciousness as far as modern neuroscience is concerned, or psychology. Buddha's in that sense radically different. So we live at a very gross level of our mental consciousness, at a level of conceptuality, which includes all our feelings and emotions, but they're still pretty gross level. So what happens is, quicker than Google, my mental consciousness is triggered, and because I've stored in my mind in this life my particular taste, what I like, it's a cup, it's orange, it's this, it's that, the overall, so quick, the mental consciousness works very quickly. So out of my mouth comes a series of words, right? And words are basically the expression of thoughts, concepts. So they're opinions. So our mental consciousness now, at the level we function at a gross level, which is its conceptuality. We have millions of thoughts, and even our feelings, we think feelings are here and thoughts are there. Or even this is what, again, the Buddhist model, and let's really look at this, is very fascinating. That even our as we call feelings, the things that where we notice them only because our body feels them, because our mind and our body are intimately connected. And I'm discussing here, again, the Buddhist view, which is based on the Vajrayana model, quite a different model of the way the mind and the body interact, and quite a different way of seeing, which again comes from the Indian view. That even our feelings like anger or what we call emotion, we feel them in our body, right? But they're mental. They're mental. We only notice them when the body's affected, and they're feelings, but they're rooted in being underneath. They're rooted in being conceptual stories. When we can begin to get this point from Buddhist psychology, this is the revelation, and this is exactly where we can begin to know we can change our minds, because our minds aren't set in stone. We can change them radically. So what we're changing is the conceptual stories. So here there are all these conceptual stories. So one comes out saying, this is a pretty cup. Or let's say it's George's cup and I'm in love with George, then of course I will adore his cup because it's George's cup. But what if his ugly boyfriend, he's given me up, or I've chucked him out, or he's cheated on me, and I see this cup, it'll appear like the most disgusting cup to my eyes, won't it? Because it's George's cup. So it's very obvious we have all these opinions. So basically, I mean, it's a bit depressing to think about it, but basically from the moment we wake up in the morning until we go to sleep at night, what do you think we're doing? We've got sensory experiences, right? And then we have opinions about them. That's how we live our lives. Now, it's okay. So you think, well, what's wrong with an opinion? Nothing wrong with it. But what Buddha's deal is that our opinions, there are some opinions that are just rubbish. They're fantasy, made up ones. So if I'm angry with George and that's his cup, it literally would appear to me as an ugly cup. But when I'm in love with him, it appears divine. So where's the real cup? Right there we can see it's nonsense. Right there we can see we have all these extreme opinions based on all sorts of things, and they're just conceptual stories. And then we believe it's true. We believe the ugliness is in the cup. We believe the beauty is in the cup. We believe the pretty cup is in the cup. Buddha says this is the source of all our suffering. And this is the function of all the neurotic states of mind, the first category, attachment. So, and their function is they exaggerate. So attachment exaggerates deliciousness. When anger's in my mind, it exaggerates ugly, or even just it's an ugly cup. From my eyes, it's an ugly cup, let's say. aversion, the bare bones state of mind beneath anger, exaggerates the ugliness of something. So when I'm in love with George, he appears divine. When I'm not in love with George because he cheated on me, he appears ugly. The same George next day, no extra fat, no extra grey hairs, or no hairs anyway. Do you understand me? We know this, but we don't join the dots. This is the very source. Right in this way we're discussing, this is the key to understanding Buddha's approach to why we suffer, and then how to get happy. Very interesting. We can hear it's true. We can hear. We don't think of it this way. So it's sort of like bad enough that things appear, as Lama Zopa says, okay, the key function of these neuroses, the first category, is they cause pain. We know that. Look at your anxiety, anger, jealousy, depression. It's not friendly. It's painful. And these stories in our mind, manifesting as these feelings are rooted in these conceptual stories that misrepresent reality. Quite literally what Buddha is saying is that. So anger the aversion that informs that angry emotion misrepresents George to me. When I'm in love with him and attachment is there, all it can see is the divine things. It over-exaggerates his beauty, over-exaggerates especially his function in making me happy. We hear these words. So we're really to dig into these and see these. This is the job of being a Buddhist, being your own therapist, as Lama Yeshe says. And it's a hard job because when I go to my therapist, I don't want to talk about my mind. Thank you. I want to talk about George, don't I? Don't understand me? I'm honest to talk about my mind. I'm honest to talk about my attachment, my misconceptions. Excuse me, what do you mean misconceptions? He did cheat on me. And she will say, oh, no, he didn't. That's not the point here. And that's where it's intense. The Buddha's way of working on your mind, yes, things happen out there, good and bad. There's no question. Things happen. But honey child, your job is to see your mind. This is an intensely difficult job. We know this. We know this. In other words, we know theoretically that something out there triggers anger in me. Something out there triggers attachment in me. But when it's really strong, we don't want to know about it. We just think he caused me anger. We know this. So it's really hard to even want to look into our mind and identify the part of it, the part that is causing me pain right now. Yes, he cheated on me. Fact. So now let's see what I can do about my mind. And this is extremely hard because I think even in our regular ways of seeing the mind in the modern world, we can't separate the external George from seeing myself. We sort of can, but we sort of figure that this is definitely coming from George. And Buddha's not saying George didn't cheat on me. He's not saying that. He's not saying he wasn't mean to me. He was. But when we really become advanced, let's give the example, when we're really advanced, if we're on the Bodhisattva path and we've literally got this amazing bodhicitta, levels of incredible compassion, and we've given up attachment, given up anger, literally, we will understand exactly what George is doing. We will hear his mean words, but literally it'll be water off a duck's back for us because our mind is so stable and we are so fulfilled. We've given up attachment, given up anger. It's good to hear what it would be like if we'd accomplished all this. We would recognize what he's saying because there's nothing that can be hooked in us. It won't cause any suffering whatsoever. That's hard to imagine. We almost don't believe that, So knowing that that's possible is encouraging because it means that I've got to work on my own mind. There's a saying in Buddhism, if you can change something out there, if I can make George a nicer guy again and stop cheating on me, great, try it. Nothing wrong. What if you can't? That's the point. What if you can't? So back to this, we're looking at the sensory consciousness, bare bones, function of your 5 senses. And this is what I'm trying to point out here, that if we can begin to recognize even the difference, it's a revelation. Oh yes, there's a cup there. It is a cup. We can even argue that it might even be considered maybe, if you voted, it might get the most votes for pretty cup. All of those things. But still, basically, there's a bunch of things, the basis of my eye consciousness, color and shape, and the rest of it's an opinion. So in a sense, Buddha's saying it's full of opinions, conceptual stories, and some are neurotic, some are not accurate opinions. They're the delusions. They exaggerate. Then the second lot, you could argue, are, relatively speaking, valid opinions, valid views. They're the virtues. They're the goodness. They're the clarity, the kindness, the love, compassion, generosity, patience, forgiveness. We know these words. And all who Buddha is saying is even forget the long term, but this is where we look to the present moment. What he's saying is, when we can if we continue to practice being angry, continue to practice being attached, practice being jealous. It sounds weird to say it that way. If we, in other words, those habits, we can see that they're there and we buy into them and continue them. And this is a tragedy in our culture because we tend to think, oh, well, they arise naturally. They must be natural. Why would I change them? It's just who I am, you know. That's why we've got to start being aware. But if we continue to buy into those views and to practice them, this can only cause me suffering every day. Right now, it'll cause me pain. They are in their nature painful. Having anger at this moment is painful for me. The depression is painful for me. The anxiety is painful for me. This is so clear. But when we're in the midst of them, anxiety, yeah, we can see, we recognize that. But when we say anger, because it's so connected to what the other person did to us. I mean, just last night at the teaching at Tibet House, one woman said, we're discussing how to, another variation of what we're discussing tonight. She mentioned her brother, who was full of rage against with his ex-partner who cheated on him or something, burning with rage every day, and he cannot see that he's causing himself suffering. That's the simple point. And I think we know this because we're obsessed with the object. And he's absolutely believing that her action is the main cause of his pain. These words sound very shocking because we do believe them actually, especially if you get an extreme example of someone being tortured. It seems insane to say that the torture is the main cause of my suffering. That is not the main cause of my suffering. Technically, Buddha's saying it's not. Technically. He's not arguing it doesn't trigger an experience because we've got the body. He's not saying it doesn't trigger an experience. But the long-term goal, for example, I remember one of the lamas in a teaching about bodhicitta, this amazing level of altruism that the Buddhist view says we can accomplish. A person who's actually got that level of this bodhicitta, that is a person who has given up attachment, has given up anger, has given up anxiety. In other words, a really highly developed person, and that's possible. It's good to hear these examples. And this person with this incredible compassion. And he said you could say this particular a certain level of this level of compassion that they've accomplished. For that person, he said, I'll never forget the words. For that person, he said, cutting off their hand and feeding it to a starving animal is as inconsequential as a leaf falling off a tree. So that sounds like mental illness, right? Like the man's insane or hasn't got a body or something, or got no senses, But all it's pointing out is this point that Buddha's making, that the level of the capacity, the level of our potential to rid the mental consciousness of neuroses and to develop the goodness, the virtue, the wisdom is insanely more than we could ever imagine using our ordinary views, And what he's based on, what the analysis of that person would be, that because they've given up ego, given up attachment, given up all the rubbish, they haven't given up their senses. They've got the sensory consciousness, no question. But there's no delusions left, and there's only this insane levels of compassion and empathy. And so that's what's overriding everything in their mind. Such compassion for that starving animal. It's hard for us to hear, but if we can hear it technically, then it tells us Buddha's view of the mind, what we're capable of. Are we communicating here?
Yeah.
Hmm. I mean, it's the Buddha's view, I think we don't think that. There's a really detailed analysis of the mind, but it's there. Most of us don't study it, We just think it's all about being mindful, watching our breath or something. And I'm being a bit sarcastic. It's an incredibly sophisticated presentation of the mind. And it's coming from these genius Indians 3,000 years ago. I promise they're the ones who mapped the mind. They mapped the mind We don't realize this in the West. We're so arrogant. We probably thought it was, at least we think it was the Greeks, you know. Okay, white people think it was the Greeks, isn't it? You understand? They were the smarty pants. Well, Buddha was, these Hindus are 1,000 years before the Greeks, you know. Nothing wrong with the Greeks. We probably think it was Mr. Freud 100 years ago. As the Dalai Lama says, with these genius Indians more than 3,000 years ago, who are the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. And that is the model of the mind that pretty much is still extant in Buddhism. That, you know, in the monastic universities, they study it in depth 2 or 3 years, you know, and it's there available to any one of us who wants to study it. Every word I'm saying here is based on it. So it's made up stuff, you know. And it's about the internal cognitive process itself. It's very fascinating. So being a Buddhist, our job is to therefore know our mind. You can, you can study it till the cows come home. You pass exams in it. But if you don't start looking and unpacking and unraveling and doing the job, doing the work, nothing will change. You'll still stay miserable, you know. So the emphasis in Buddhism is that by changing our mind, we can learn to be happy. He's not saying the world doesn't have, he's not saying the external action, external events don't play a role. He's just saying we can make our mind more powerful. That's all he's saying. Wow, how amazing. How amazing to be that liberated. So we're not like pulled from pillar to post by every tiny external thing, which we are now. You know, just a stranger looks at us wrongly in the street, we have a mental breakdown. A red light comes, we have a panic. Do you understand me? We're completely driven by the external world. You know, we're driven by it, which indicates we don't have much awareness of what's going on in here. So the Buddhist approach is like reverse that. It doesn't mean you become stupid. You live in this world, and the irony is you enjoy it all the more when you're more in charge with your mind. That's how you get happy, he's saying. That's how you get happy. It's hard work, but it's doable, you know. No, and so get happy includes also being more courageous in the face of the dramas. Happy doesn't mean having a gooey, happy feeling every second. No, you can be having troubles and suffering with your family, but you can keep a stability there that enables you to stay stable and stay kind of fulfilled, you know, not be completely thrown by all the dramas, which we are now. We're so fragile. And I think it's only because we haven't learned to pay attention here. We mainly only pay attention there, isn't it? It's how we're brought up. So Buddha's view is pretty amazing, actually. And I would suggest that all the kind of the therapies and the marvelous approaches we have in the West are rooted in this very approach. He was the one. What about the Indians before him? The Hindus, they're the ones who began this. No question. So it's pretty marvelous knowledge, really. So ask me some questions now, I think. All right. Cheers, everybody. Ask me some questions. Start have a discussion. Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
I think I understand.
You think you what?
I think I understand you.
Okay,
I
good.
understand exactly
The
what
word,
you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah, right.
I do.
Yes,
I
good.
feel it too.
Yes, yes.
And I've heard it before.
Exactly,
also.
exactly.
It's not
No, that's right.
And
Every time you
I-
hear it, it's a little bit clear, isn't it?
right,
Yeah.
and different people
That's
say
right.
it
That's right,
lands
exactly,
differently.
exactly.
And I am better. I'm
Yes.
much better.
You're
than
working
I
hard at,
was.
that's right.
But I'm still biting that hook.
That's right, exactly. And
I'm
so
biting
all,
that hook.
that's right. So I think all that shows is it's quite advanced. We can say the words as if they're easy, but it's a pretty advanced level of practice. So that's why we have to be humble. I think we've discussed this before. To hear, I think, because in Buddhism, what you're hearing all the time is the examples of the ones who've accomplished it. It's like watching Roger Federer every day playing tennis, but, you know, as if that's the only ones that exist. It's good to see what the potential is. We have to be humble to know what's happening. Is she laughing or crying?
I'm so sorry. I've heard about tennis all day.
Oh.
We were in the earlier.
Oh, okay, there you go. So about Roger Federer. We've got to know that the examples are there because it gives us courage to keep moving. But then we have to be very humble to know where we're at. And as I think the other thing is, and let's go into this in more detail because this is our biggest stumbling block. The function of attachment in us is this emotional hunger to always have things to be better. And its main function is to be dissatisfied. With whom? With ourselves. So here we are practicing And if we compare ourselves with how we were in the past, or if we even compare ourselves with some really extra crazy people, we are definitely not as bad as them or as we were, but we always have a tendency to be dissatisfied. And so one of the key things we have to trick ourselves into learning, and this is part of how to get happy, to be content with where I'm at. Be happy that I was able to hit one ball, one thing today. So far, so good. I'm doing okay. Instead of always being dissatisfied, always finding fault. That's one of our worst crimes against ourselves. And that's the function of attachment, because attachment's energy is dissatisfaction. Do you understand me?
Well, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't even think of it that way, but yeah, it humbled me, like failed again.
That's right.
Okay.
Oh, no, that's
I
right.
did it again, and
Yeah.
after all these years.
No, that's right.
When will,
I know. See,
I'm
that's
just an idiot.
That's right. See, that's the trouble. Instead of, okay, it's harder than I thought, I did my best, pick myself up and keep going. Because that's what gives us enthusiasm. Otherwise, we will be exhausted and give up. This is the real key day to day. And that's understanding attachment is the only way to understand this. It's a natural thing in all of us. The one we find fault out there, definitely blame other, anger. So we have the anger towards ourselves. We don't call it angry, but it is basically angry, finding fault. Instead of I tried again, and you pick us up and just keep moving, but we put ourselves down, and it's automatic. So if we can catch that and have a better interpretation, this itself is a powerful way to get more content. Right there, where we are at. Instead of when I can play like Federer, then I'll be happy. Sort of like you're weeping and crying with misery every day because you're not like Federer yet. You'll go mad, basically. Happiness has to come every minute. Have satisfaction with where we are. We all know these words, but that takes work, because the first voice is the one you just said. Everybody's the same. Do you understand?
So what would you suggest, a little bit of a technique when that happens?
To catch. And that the key to success is the level of our ability to be familiar with what's arising in our mind second by second. And that is not easy, because we don't catch until it starts to be shaky. But the thoughts are like a thousand thoughts a second,
So the catching, and then to
say something positive instead of negative.
Excuse me.
Say something positive instead of negative. Have a positive assessment instead of a negative one.
I'm getting angry. This is getting me irritated.
So you mean there's something, okay, so let's keep simple. Something's going on out there that's triggering your anger, right?
Right.
And then you catch yourself being angry. And then, oh my God, here I go again. Right. Okay, I'm still being angry. Wow, that's interesting. Okay, I'll just do my best. So it's like anger is one thing, and then being angry about being angry, that's the real problem. Do you get my point? Because the habits are profoundly deep. We've got to recognize that. They are profoundly deep habits. When we know that, we'll be more humble and just catch. But it takes a lot of work. And it's a negative opinion comes very easily about ourselves. Positive ones, we have to really work hard to bring them up, to make them happen. It's true, I promise you. Do you understand me?
I didn't.
We almost resist it. We almost say, I'm doing my best. Part of us saying, no, you're not. And we prefer to believe the rubbish,
It took so long to realize, oh, it's not out there, it's in here.
No, that's right.
And I kind of thought, well, when I finally realized that, it's going to be easy.
No. It's just, just keep going, keep going. So all it does point out is how far we have to go, but that's okay. That's okay. Just keep moving, keep going. Every second counts. We're a work in progress. We've got to have a long-term view. I think we have to have a long-term view. Do you understand? Someone else online, perhaps. Yes, Eileen, sweetheart, talk to me. Unmute.
Yes, this is, if I could just, when you're studying with you and studying Buddhism, I understand things intellectually when you talk about like looking at the cup and that we're projecting onto our external life, everything conceptually. But it seems that the only way really, aside from looking at things when you can, trying to catch yourself, the bottom line is that it's only through meditation that you really grasp what emptiness is.
We're not even talking about empty, so don't leap to that. We're not even discussing what
Okay.
I mean, it's implied, isn't it? I agree with you, it's implied. So, okay, I can say yes to you, but let's analyze what you mean by that. All that means, Eileen, is, okay, let's look at the word meditate, because there's a lot of conceptions about that. There's many, many techniques, and that's perfectly fine. Buddha does not have copyright on it. So anyone can say the word meditate, and you make up your own. No one says you can't. But if we want to discuss Buddhism, we better know what he means, not just make up what we think he means. It's very rude, you know? So it's interesting. There's two modes of meditation, okay? Put your little mute back on and sit back, Eileen. There's two modes of meditation, thousands of techniques, okay? But two fundamental modes. The first mode, which is the one we typically think of as meditation, and this is, again, invented by these genius Indians, it's called, it's known by the name of its end result. It's known as samadhi, concentration, but a level of concentration that we wouldn't even posit as existing, because it's at a subtler level of mind. So when we say that word, we don't know what it means. What do you mean subtler level of mind? Because we don't have a view like that in modern science. We don't have a view. So then, okay, this type of this meditation technique, this concentration meditation technique, known in, you know, another, it's also known, one level of this is known as shamatha, or calm abiding in English, okay? And there's in the text, it's described, the technology of it, the methodology is described in 9 stages of cultivation. So the starting point is you practice learning to stay focused on one thing. So the two main obstacles, as we can see in our ordinary daily life too, the two main obstacles that we're trying to conquer in this development of this subtler levels of concentration, which is described in terms of 9 stages, which if you're pretty qualified will take you a couple of years minimum to accomplish up in the mountains on your own, working 15 hours a day. Just to even be ready to get there is already advanced. Do you understand? So it's just good to know, but we can start practicing it. So the two main obstacles are the tendency of the mind to be berserk, right? And that's how we live, isn't it? It's berserk, uncontrolled. If you managed to write down every thought you'd have a novel a minute, you know? I mean, I think in the West, they even say you have like 1,000 thoughts a second. And we know that's true. We all are very familiar with our berserk mind. It's totally uncontrolled, no coherence, and we don't, and it's just there behind. We're busy washing the dishes and driving the car, and we know it's never stopping, uncontrolled thoughts. And that, of course, is normal in the world. So we just consider it's so-called normal. Yeah, it's normal, but it's kind of crazy because there's no control. Now, we all know the other tendency of the mind is the mind to space out. So as soon as we close your eyes, oh, I might just watch my breath for 5 minutes. Within 2 minutes, you're either berserk, forgetting that you're watching your breath because you're busy thinking about your boyfriend, or you're fast asleep. Do you understand? They're the two extremes. So they say the two extremes are either the mind to be overexcited or the mind to be dull. And so you go, basically these 9 stages, you go through these constant lessening of the excitement and lessening of the dullness at a level of conceptuality to an incredibly subtle degree, way more than we can imagine. We don't even posit it as existing. So as you get even more subtle, in other words, you lessen and lessen the excitement level, you lessen and lessen the dullness level, and your mind gets quieter and quieter. You even eventually get to the level where your sensory consciousness ceases completely, which is unheard of for us. You'd be asleep, you know, if that happened, not here. You've accessed this subtle level of cognition, and your conceptuality is getting ever more subtle. And because it's more subtle, and because the senses aren't involved, the mind gets ever more concentrated, but also, the bonus, ever more blissful. Literally blissful. I mean, you've got to hear those words. This is beginning to taste the nature of our mind. So these Indians invented this technique, and which means it's incredibly sophisticated, to be able to utterly control this craziness at the conceptual level, and even to go beyond the sensory, and to be super subtle and super conscious. The best we can say is the words. We can't imagine it, you know? So now, Eileen, getting to your point, concentration, you need that. It's got its own benefits. It brings bliss and joy, but it's really only a tool. All you're trying to accomplish is this super subtle, to whatever degree you can do it, level of cognition that when you now doing your session, this is the classical combination of both techniques. So you've been to a class, you've heard your teacher talk about, let's say it is emptiness, let's say it's something, even let's say it's karma, it doesn't matter what the topic is, these series of concepts about reality, impermanence, all Buddha's views of the world. Do you understand? They're conceptual presentations by the Buddha of what he has observed the way the world is. And so a person buying into these views, you listen to them, you like the idea, you try to, but to really internalize these things in the really perfect way is you get some concentration. And to the degree that you've accomplished any concentration, maybe it's this third level of the 9, and that's pretty sophisticated, Eileen. Most of us just doing a bit every day won't get anywhere near the third level. Are you seeing what I'm saying? Let's just pretend. Then you'd stop your concentrating. You'd now go to the second mode of meditation, and this also is known in terms of its result, and it's called special insight. Now, that's a great word in English. Insight, inner seeing. Let's say you've got a problem and you would say, oh, I was thinking about that problem and I got a bit of insight into it. It's like internal understanding, isn't it? Some kind of experiential understanding of something. So it's a great word, and that's the literal meaning. So what you do in your classical session of meditation, you listen to the teaching. Let's say it's about emptiness. Let's say in a sophisticated, so it's dependent arising. And you hear it. It's all very nice concepts. So what you do is you've got that in your notes or whatever. You've taken all these thoughts down. You sit down on your cushion. You get some concentration to the degree that you've accomplished it. You stop at that level. You stop the focusing. You keep that level of focus, though. You go to the second mode, and now you take the things that you heard today about dependent arising and you think it through conceptually. Now, this level of conceptuality can be very, very subtle and very, very sophisticated and very, very necessary. It's super subtle, sophisticated analysis, understand? And what that will do, because you've got concentration and because it's more subtle, it'll go more deeply and it will trigger an insight. It'll be an aha moment. And the aha moments is what we want. And they will continue to get ever deeper, ever deeper, ever deeper, ever deeper. As you get more concentration, your aha moments will get deeper and deeper. And that's when you have real, genuine experience of the truth of emptiness and the truth of the reality of impermanence and the reality of the mind and the reality of karma. Do you understand? That's how it works. Are we communicating? So it's super hard work. You're squeezing your brain, honey child, but this is the way, if you wanted to even, the level of concentration we can accomplish also brings an incredible ability to have a flexible mind. So if you want to be a good musician, the best way to do it is get some single point of concentration. If you want to be a good mathematician, that'll be the quickest way to do it. You'll whiz through your exams in 3 minutes because you've developed your mind to such a sophisticated degree of clarity and brilliance, the levels of which we don't have methods. We know there are some beings who are like this. We usually call them autistic, all these genius, intelligent people. But they've probably been meditators in a past life, Do you understand me? You're able to access this incredibly sophisticated level of clarity, not just blissing out, but conceptual clarity. And because you're completely in charge of it, you can go beyond it as well. You can just sit there and stay focused on that insight without conceptuality. Do you understand, Eileen? This is a long-term approach, So meanwhile, we do our best with our clumsy old mind that can't concentrate more than 3 seconds. Do you understand me? That's why it's so marvelous to have holy people like Venerable Renee, who's done retreats, who's accomplished this. He won't admit it, of course. These genius. Did I ever send you that interview I did with him back 30 years ago? I'll send it to you. I interviewed him about one of his first retreats. It's a very lovely interview. I'll send it to you. Okay, Eileen. But one step at a time, honey, we do our best. There's an awful lot we can do just by listening. Don't worry about it. Look how much just by listening we can do pretty well. The pennies drop every day. Oh, I see now. Oh, I get it. We all know that. This is how we learn. That's how we learn everything, Eileen. That's how we learn math and music. Nothing new about it. It's just that these Buddha's got these genius, sophisticated techniques of doing it well. That's all. Internalizing the knowledge very profoundly. That's all. Do you understand me? Any other questions? Yes, George.
Just a technical question. So is the spiritual insight meditation, is that also known as vipassana?
Yeah, that's right. That's a Sanskrit for it. Exactly. That's exactly right. Or Hlaktong in Tibetan. So there's many types of it. I mean, Buddha, one of the ones that's most popularly known literally as Vipassana, which is what people tend to think of as all there is for the Buddha's teachings, is one of the very first ones he gave, which is on the basis of concentration. You get your concentration, the first level, but then the insight meditation you do, you use your concept, you use your mind to observe the senses of the body. So what he wants us to get insight into isn't the body, but is impermanence. It's a method to get insight into impermanence. That's his method. But he's got many methods. This is a more sophisticated one because it's just the mental. It's not the senses. You see my point? There's different levels of insight. So the aim is to hear first theoretically impermanence, karma, all these concepts that are Buddha's views of how the world is. We can hear them intellectually, but to make them go deeper, you've got to have concentration in the end to really make them truly experiential. And eventually when it's emptiness, then only finally then when you can cut the rubbish completely by accessing a subtle level of mind and getting direct non-conceptual insight into the reality of all of these things, and they're unmovable from the mind. Then we've achieved, liberation. It's practical psychology. It's just genius psychology. That's all. Do you understand me? That's why it's important we say it in a down-to-earth way. Do you understand, George?
I have a question
Yes.
about what you were talking about today. Who's next?
Go down. What's wrong with your fingers? What happened?
I cut myself with a glass, washing a glass.
Oh my God.
Broke and it spotted tendons and I got surgery.
Oh my goodness.
I was a violinist.
What?
I was a violinist.
You were what?
I was a violinist.
Oh, you were a violinist.
Was.
You are a violinist. When did it happen?
When?
When did this happen?
July.
What?
July.
So how long will it take to heal?
Few months.
My God, it's a bit shattering for you.
Yeah, I don't know if I will play again, but
My God.
that's my path.
Anyway, tell me your question.
My question is, so you were talking about detaching yourself, there's opinions that we have about the senses and detaching our minds from that, right? And I think that I see that clearly, for example, if I walk down the street and somebody yells something at me, my
That's right.
first reaction is to
That's
get
right.
mad.
That's right.
and
Yeah, that's right.
But I see that very clearly how I can observe my mind
That's right.
and
Stay steady or whatever. Yeah, go
not
on.
let that happen.
That's right. So then?
But then there's another situation in which I find that more difficult, and it's when I have a project that's very important to me. Let's say that I'm recording an album with
That's
a
right.
producer,
Exactly.
and I care very much about that album.
Of course, yes.
And the result. But there are issues with this person.
Right, exactly.
And it's really hard to work with this
That's
person.
exactly right. I understand.
And so the question is, how can we do both things?
I understand your point. Totally. I understand, darling. I understand. Yep. I understand. Exactly. The key to that is to understand the difference, to understand the neurotic states of mind and distinguish them from the valid states of mind. This is not how we think in the Western psychological model. So the neurotic ones, the main one of which Buddha says effectively attachment is the main one. This is so cute word for us, but it's a profound, it's got profound levels. So attachment is like this underneath everything. It's there completely instinctively. And it's the main voice of this sense of an I. It's a neurotic voice. It's not a valid, we've got love and kindness and compassion and intelligence, all of which you need to have as well, and empathy. They're all there too. They're our saving grace. This is the stuff that makes us miserable. This is the stuff that gets us crazy. This is stuff that causes our pain. So we have to be familiar with them. So attachment's main energy in, let's say, your scenario. So there you are, you're trying to make it good cake. You're trying to play, whatever it is, record an album, whatever the job is. There's a relative reality of doing it nicely because let's say you want to make a cake, so you want to feed it to some friends. Now, you can put it this way. If you're really attached to that, you're completely neurotic, you're freaking out, you're getting so anxious, you're panicking what people are going to think of if the cake doesn't work, and you go crazy and you make it, and you can't even do it properly. And we just assume that's because I care about the cake. No, it's because we're worried and neurotic and over-exaggerating it. So it's really hard to see the difference between that, which is anxious and worried, and an intelligent clarity that keeps you steady and has, I want to make the best cake for my friends, I want to make them happy. That's compassion, and have that without being polluted by the attachment. And that's what's hard, darling. So what we tend to do is throw the baby out with the bathwater and think, oh, well, it won't matter. It doesn't matter if the album comes or not. It doesn't matter if there's a cake. That's nihilism. It's extreme. This is really the proof of practice, when we can learn to see the neurotic, craving, needy to be a good girl, do it properly, and worried. But it's hard to see that because it's just so automatic. And we don't ever have the clarity separate from the attachment. They come together and it pollutes the good part of us. So you could argue, if you can, so to want the album to be well, to want that cake, and it's got to be based on some kind of empathy. If it's just completely greedy, I want the best album so I can be the most famous violinist, you'll be in trouble. You're not going to ever get happy. You'll just go crazy. So it's got to be having some virtuous basis, some positive basis, some empathetic one, some compassionate one. You can be anything. You can want to become a multimillionaire so you can do many good things. There's nothing wrong. It's not moralistic. So it's always got to be driven by some kind of ethical. There's got to be some good ethics in there and some sense of empathy and connectedness. That's the valid side. Then the other one is the I-based, unhappy one, neurotic, needy, and they come together. So until we start looking deeply inside, we're not going to see the difference. Do you understand?
Yeah.
It's the same as love and attachment. You can love somebody. Love is, I want you to be happy. May you be happy. It's altruistic. It's connected to the other person. It's not to do with it's the other person. But then you've got attachment, which is totally I-based. And we assume they're the same thing. And it's really hard to see the difference. And this is the way the Buddhist analysis is. You've got the neurotic, deluded, I-based ones. And then you have the clear, connected, useful, practical, empathetic, connected, virtuous ones, if you like. And they just are mixed together like a big soup. To see the difference is the job. So you don't have to chuck the baby out the bathwater. But it takes practice. That's why I'm saying practicing patience. If you've got to work with other people, you've got to have your goal, be clear, and then it's tremendously difficult to see your because anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And anxiety is just that. Anxiety is just this panic when we can't control everything. So you've got to be able to want to control it in a good way with patience and connectedness and hearing the other person, but staying steady, never losing sight of your goal. It takes a lot of inner work, very sophisticated. This is what practice brings. Do you understand me?
Yeah.
But just don't. A common one is, you just let go of attachment so that it doesn't matter. That's nihilism. No, not like that. Do you understand? Attachment, needy, neurotic, I-based, fear-based, constricted, hungry, manipulative, possessive. It's a disaster. You understand? Okay, one step at a time, honey. What else, people? Yes.
We have one online, Venerable Robina.
Where are we? Who's talking?
We have Patty is
God.
online. Yes, Michael, you want to go ahead and unmute?
Who's talking? Michael. Okay, go, Mike. Go, talk to me.
Hi, I'm just wondering if attachment becomes like desire gone haywire, like we take like a healthy desire and we turn it into like this exaggerated state that we can't have happiness without it. Is that really what it is?
I'm a bit unclear, Mike. Say it again in a slightly different way. What are you saying?
Well, I'm just wondering if like desire, right, can be like an okay thing to have, right? But it's when
It can be what?
it can be okay to have desires, right?
Okay, so I think before you go further, we have to define our terms, don't we? We've got to be clear. And this is the trouble, even among different Buddhists in different traditions, we all use these words in different ways. And if we haven't got a similar definition, we can't even discuss. So in general, in Buddhism, the word desire, attachment, craving are all synonymous. They're levels of the same thing, and they're necessarily neurotic and deluded. I'm not saying when you say the word desire that you mean that, but I'm just saying the use of the words, we would say it's the neurotic one. So then if you like, you could say the positive one, like getting your cake made for the sake of others, making your album, is aspiring, aspiration. I want to accomplish this. I want to get this done. I want to get a good job. I want to find, we have to underpin that aspiration with some kind of virtue and ethics. Otherwise it becomes attachment. So it's a way to saying it is aspiration, or I want, nothing wrong. I want to make a cake doesn't mean you're attached to making a cake. It's a question of how we use the words. So given that, what's the question?
So I guess I wasn't clear on the term, but it sounds to me is like when it starts to become I-based, right? When it becomes I-based, it's no longer.
Well, the problem is when it's I-based and fearful and neurotic and exaggerating and distorted and constricted, that's just a way of talking. That's when it's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, there were times in life when there were certain things that I wanted, and my whole life became fixated on doing certain things.
That's right, and that's when it's a problem, isn't it? The fixatedness is that's what attachment is. Yeah, exactly.
And I was no longer enjoying it. I was just trying to feed this
That's right.
endless desire.
Yeah,
And it just,
yeah. So therefore, the question is,
well, that's what I was trying to understand how the word desire was being used.
well, I know it's very difficult because everyone uses it a different way, but technically, if you look in Buddhist psychology, desire is a synonym for attachment. But we can talk it in general ways. Even Buddhists, even the Dalai Lama says, oh, you can have a good desire, you can have good wanting, because it's very hard for us to hear this division between the neurotic states of mind and the valid states of mind. It's hard to hear that level, that way of dividing. We don't think that way. We think there's good anger and there's bad anger. There's good attachment, there's bad attachment. You can talk this way to be useful. So, but technically, the way Buddha describes attachment or craving or desire is it's distorted. It's coming from a neurotic sense of I. It exaggerates deliciousness. It's possessiveness. It's neurotic. It's manipulative. It's controlling. It's distressing. It's anxiety. It's got all that character. So they're just the use of those words. We can be easy in our conversation, with other people, but that's the character of the unhappy ones. And the character of the valid ones, the virtuous ones, the ethical ones is not like that. They're peaceful, they're connected to others, they're rooted in dependent arising, they're reasonable, and we can cultivate those and make those the basis of why we want to make millions of dollars, make those the basis of why we want to make an album, and make those the basis of why we want to make a cake. And you still get pleasure from it, There's pleasure comes from it as well. So it's the distinction between the neurotic, or very simply, as Buddha would call it, the negative and the positive states of mind. He talks like all the virtuous and the non-virtuous.
I always felt though, like if I got like what I wanted over here, then if I something that I desired happened, it never satisfied me. I just moved up to here.
And when it's driven, let's say you want to eat a piece of cake. If it's driven mostly by attachment, you'll shove it in the mouth. You'll be always expecting of the happiness, and you'll just end up with a stuffed stomach and miserable. We know that, but we even know just enjoying a piece of cake more, eating it more slowly, thinking of it, we even think even in a more spacious way. I'm going to eat it so I can be happy and healthy and be used to others. You'll enjoy it more. We all can see that. The neurotic states of mind muck up everything,
I see.
Isn't it? But it's very sophisticated. It's hard to distinguish because they're deep in our bones, Mike. They're just so ingrained. And in our world, we incorporate these into being a normal person. So we think a normal person, a normal, healthy person has some attachment, some anger, some jealousy, some low self-esteem, and hopefully a bit of love and compassion. Buddha's just more radical and says, we've all got them, but we've got to recognize the parts that make us miserable and recognize the parts that make us happy and work on it. That's the job. Do you understand?
Yes.
In other words, this is the method of how to get happy yourself. This is nothing about altruism yet. This is how to get happy yourself. Change your mind. Do you understand? It's not holy. It's practical. We all want to be happy. This is his method. Do you understand, Mike?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
What else, people? And it's a job you can't just do it if you don't. You've got to be done. Having Gotta be doing it 24 hours a day, really. I mean, allowed to have a sleep, it's all right, but as soon as you wake up, it starts. In your dreams, even you can do being, you know, you're watching it.
We have
And
another
I think it's the
online.
encouraging thing is because we've got potential, that we're a work in progress. I like that. You know, it's encouraging.
When you say, as soon as you wake up, it
It
starts.
starts, I know, it's true. It's true, isn't it? But we have to learn to enjoy it, you know, not be kind of a drag by it. It's got to be, and it's really intense, hard work, but we are the beneficiaries of it. I'm not even discussing being kind to other people yet. This is a method to us to get happy, people. But we hear it as a method to get tortured and miserable, you know. We think being spiritual is being miserable, you know. So depressing. I remember Lamiesi when he first met all the Westerners, all the hippies, you know. He said, you don't even know how to be happy. Also tortured, you know. I'm so bad, hopeless, can't do anything. Got to be a bit happy. Be happy that we're a mess, but be happy that we're working on it. I think that's important. I mean, you know, if you let's say you decide you're overweight and you know and you're not healthy, you want to go to the gym. Hear my point. So as soon as you decide to go to the gym, you get a bit optimistic, right? And you go to the gym for the first day and you come back and you feel worse than you felt in a week because you didn't know you got muscles, you didn't know you had. But look how happy you feel because now you're doing something about it. But you even feel worse. You still look fat and ugly in the mirror, there's no change. But you know you're doing something about it now. And that's what gives us courage. That's what makes us happy. You delight in your effort. That's the point that I have to point out. We have to delight in our effort, sweetheart. This is what lifts us. Instead of, oh, I'll only be happy when I lose all the weight. And it'll never end because by the time you lose all the weight and you look in the mirror, you'll still be miserable because you'll always be dissatisfied, you know. We've got to trick ourselves. Really, I swear to you. Be happy. Rejoice in our effort. Be happy. We've got to be happy. Not have someone else say you're doing a good job because we're a bit addicted to other people praising us. We've got to praise ourselves. But it makes us very nervous, I tell you. It's very strange, isn't it? The irony of ego is we love to hate ourselves. You know? So ironic, so weird. We've got to be very courageous and praise ourselves. Not arrogance. It's not arrogance. It's practical. You're making an effort. Be happy with yourself. A happy thought is a virtuous thought, basically. Put it that way. A virtuous thought has a happy character about it. Do you understand that? That's a really very simple way of putting it. A virtuous thought has a happy character. A non-virtuous thought is necessarily miserable. Do you understand me? That's the thing to see. So we have to practice having happy thoughts. It sounds so silly, but honestly, it's like that. And like anything, you get used to it. What are you doing? What's wrong? You hurt your arm playing tennis.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay.
We have one more question online, Venerable
Oh,
Rabina.
we'll go then. Go, yeah. So who is it? It's Freddie. Are you Freddie?
Yes, hi.
Okay,
Hi,
so
Venerable
that's-
Robina. It's
Okay.
very nice to see you live.
Yeah.
Do you find, I'm speaking of myself, but do you find that some practitioners, once they start, that neurotic mind really kind of comes back up to the surface, like with gusto, like, oh, you're doing it wrong, you suck, this is doing nothing, and then you find yourself, oh, I'm just going to stop the practice because there's no point. And I say that because I'm struggling. I'm struggling with, and I'm just curious if other practitioners come
No, I
across
think,
this.
okay, well, I think the point here, Freddie, I think it's the same with you. Even in the classical presentation of this 9 stages of concentration, which is quite advanced, I remember the one Lama, he said, a sign of success at the first of the 9 stages is you think you're getting worse. But we're not, darling. We're noticing what's always been there. You become aware. You're conscious. The same with going to the gym. You've been sitting happily overweight, 20 kilos or 20 pounds overweight, and just getting used to it. This is me. And suddenly go to the gym and you discover all this pain and all these muscles you didn't know you had. So you're more conscious now. And that's not because you're getting worse. It's because you're doing the work. So Freddie, don't give up, baby. But do what I'm saying here. Have some positive thoughts about your progress. You've got to argue with attachment. Attachment's main energy is dissatisfaction. Its main energy is dissatisfaction. That's the terrible tragedy. So if you're following mostly attachment, there's this massive expectation that I'll get the cake and happiness will come. But the tragedy is even the first mouthful, it does trigger a happy feeling, but attachment saying, not enough, Robina, give me another piece. And it's a bottomless pit. A happiness that comes from attachment, this is not moralistic, the happy feelings that come from following attachment can never, Lama Zopa puts it, they can never grow. But happiness coming from virtuous thoughts and virtuous activity, that's the method to grow happy feelings. It's a practical issue. So practice having happy thoughts about yourself. I can't stress that enough. It's a miracle. Don't lie to yourself and say, oh, I'm doing beautifully, and you're not really going to the gym at all. You're demented. Do you understand me? But honey child, please, Freddie, please, Freddie. We have to practice being satisfied, which means I'm doing okay. Lamiechi's favorite saying to Westerners was, good enough, dear, good enough, because he could see the neurotic, never satisfied, self-absorbed, neurotic, crying, moaning, self-pity hippies, you know, Westerners. And all he did was try to lift us. Good enough, dear, good enough, he'd say, you know. We have to do that to ourselves. Otherwise, we're tortured. Do you understand? Good, Freddie. Yes.
Thank you, Annabelle. So my question is about attachment and emptiness. Like, but did you say that realization of emptiness stops attachment completely?
Oh, of course, that's
But
right.
I'm
That's the point.
wondering, like, why?
Why?
Like, so they say attachment is based on grasping an I and mine, but why does it not rise
Okay,
against
attachment, I would put it this way. So the root neurosis for the Buddha, the root neurosis, the root delusion, the root misconception, which is so subtle that it's like a joke, is utterly assumed in the depth of our being, that there is a separate individual, separate, disconnected, concrete, set in stone me. It's totally assumed that an attachment is its main voice. Attachment is this emotional hunger to get what that supposed me wants. And then aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. Then all the other dramas are rooted in those three. So attachment to the sensory objects is a really gross level. But the subtler attachment, which is only really going to go when you finally realize emptiness, is to being seen and heard and approved of by other people. So it's almost as if having attachment, we're like a half a person. We're half, and we have to have other beings, other people praise us, approve of us, verify us, validate us. So as you're lessening attachment, it's like you're healing that, and you learn to validate yourself. And by the time you get to constant, lessening attachment, lessening the neuroses, all the neuroses are all the voices of I, lessening all of them, meaning you're becoming more glorious, more fulfilled, more content, more fulfilled. And finally, when you realize emptiness, you've cut the very assumption of an intrinsic I. So there's no basis to any attachment, any aversion, or anything else. All the delusions are gone. They're like flitted away.
Why isn't mere I, the existing I
can't hear you very well, even though you've got a microphone. What?
Why isn't mere I?
Why what?
An I?
What?
Existing I.
What about it?
Why isn't it a basis for attachment?
Because it's merely labeled. It's much more subtle.
Still, there is mere happiness, mere good, mere
Pardon?
delicious cake.
Pardon?
Like, there is still delicious cake and existent I.
Yeah, of course there's an I, and of course there's a cake, and of course there's happiness. All those things still exist. Emptiness doesn't contradict them. So why
don't you attach to the delicious cake anymore?
Why don't you? Because what? Why don't you what?
Why don't you attach to the delicious cake anymore?
When what? When you realize emptiness?
Yes.
Because you know there's no intrinsic cake there.
So what?
You're not putting any. Pardon?
So what?
So what's what?
And why?
You have to understand what attachment. So what does emptiness mean for you then? What are you saying? What's the emptiness you're talking about? What is empty? What are you discussing as emptiness? What do you mean by it? I have to understand your meaning of it, because you don't seem to be like talking the same one as me.
Not existing on its own side.
Pardon?
Not existing on its own side.
It's because what? I'm a bit deaf. I'm sorry. I've got to get bloody.
Not existing from its own side, just being merely labeled by the mind?
Yeah, these are words are right. That's right. Well, you got all the words. You got all the words right. So you got to put some meat on the bones of those words by thinking about what it means. Then you'll understand why when you wouldn't. Of course, you wouldn't have attachment. Attachment is an over-exaggeration of something. Ego grasping, the root delusion, is an over-exaggeration of your I. So when you've got a valid cognition of I, it's a recognition of a dependent arising I. So there's nothing to grasp at. As Lama Zopa says, when you realize the emptiness of I, there's not an atom of I there. It's as if there's no I. But dependent arising, there is an I. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if there's not. So these are the two truths together. That's the way the yogi puts it. So the bringing it together, the two truths, is the way to find the answer to what you're saying. So you have to know the words first, but then you've got to find the way to understand experientially, even just intellectually experientially, how when you realize there's no intrinsic I, then there's nothing to be attached to. But there's still an I, but there's no attachment. It's like light, spacious, nothing to grasp at, no fear, no anxiety, no panic, no drama. There's just an I, and there's a cake, and there's pleasure, and there's pain, and there's good, and there's bad, and there's up, and there's down. Things still exist. And they exist finally because they're empty. Emptiness enables things to exist. They couldn't exist if they weren't empty. Just keep studying it, keep thinking about it, keep meditating.
Thank you.
Okay? Yeah, people. 8 o'clock, 6:30. I know I was late, but we've done pretty well. Any more questions? Maybe it's a natural way to finish. I don't know. Yes, sweetheart.
Hello, Venerable.
Give her the mic, please.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Venerable, for
Okay.
sharing. So I got a question. I was reading about How to Have a Good Heart by Lama Zopa Rinpoche.
Yeah.
And then he's basically saying, like, if you have any physical suffering or physical injuries, just imagine that you're actually having those injuries on behalf of other sentient
That's right,
beings
yes.
in order to, feel
the trouble is with Lama Zopa, he talks at such a high level. Even just his simplest method for getting happy is to be happy you're suffering and you suffer for everybody else. I mean, God Almighty, who thinks that way? I mean, excuse me, mate. What do you mean that's going to make me happy? I mean, hear it, but that's how he's talking. That's where he's at. He talks at the highest level, you know. Of course, it's a great method, but I mean, my God, it's so difficult, isn't it? When you're miserable, you know, and you're supposed to be happy that you're miserable because you're taking everyone else's happiness, everyone else is suffering on you. I mean, honey, child, go for it. I understand. I'm talking a more basic level here. Change your mind, you know.
So I'm like, because I'm reading about it and I'm like, okay, I tried to do it.
And did you try? What did you do? Did you help you? I helped your mind?
It doesn't. Like, it probably helped for like a second. And then next
There you
second, I'm
go.
like, I'm still suffering. I don't really
That's
feel
right.
like-
Well, it doesn't mean it's going to go away. But when you talk, I mean, having a person like Lama Zopa, I mean, it's hard to imagine because he's like the living example of the bodhisattva who's happy when he gives his hand to a starving animal. I mean, he had a stroke back in 2011. I remember Venerable Roger, his attendant. And I could, you know, and he said when he was with him in the hospital, it seemed to him, he said, that he was even more blissful, more joyful, more compassionate than ever before. And already before he was insane. Just by having this pain and offering it and being, it's too hard to imagine it, you know. So the best we can do is read about it and try and understand the logic. So for me, I try to keep it simple at this base. We can understand this basic level. We can build on it. You understand? But okay, so use an ordinary example of how that could be true. If you're miserable and then you go and help one dog who's suffering, that's going to make you happy, guaranteed. So that's something, that's a tangible thing. As soon as we reach out to somebody else, I think we can see the benefit to ourselves right there as an antidote to our own misery. Would you agree with that? That for me is, that we can practice. That's real. But as soon as we're just absorbed in ourselves, as soon as we can reach out beyond I to another, even for a second, even that moment, even the headache for a moment won't be so bad. Okay, you stop reaching out and the headache comes back. But we can see that. So that's a good sign, I think. That shows the virtuous empathy, compassion for others can be a power. And that's the thing too. It's like, I mean, Lama Zopa's level is so high, but I remember when I first heard all these teachings about bodhicitta and compassion when in the very beginning, I thought they were just over the top. These people are crazy, you know. But I remember the Dalai Lama saying, If you want to help others, practice compassion. If you want to help yourself, practice compassion. That for me, I find beneficial more than Lama Zopa's. That's too high. But this one, practical. Realize we don't have to be miserable, but if I can have virtuous thoughts, even about myself, that's a method to get happy. It lifts you. It's obvious. I'm a creep, or I'm doing pretty well. It's obvious which one is the preferable thought, isn't it? We just have to remember, that's all. It's not moralistic, it's practical. So happy thoughts, positive thoughts, including compassion, can only make us happy. So I find that's the way to say what he's saying at a more dramatic level, you know. That's the key point right at the beginning. Negative thoughts make us miserable in their nature. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we finished there, okay? So thank you, people, for coming along. And this nice conversation we're having. It's very helpful. Thank you so much. Because every time I say these things, I'm getting a bit clarity as well. Thank you very much. That's already good. It's how it is, isn't it? I mean, so every time you play tennis, you probably get better at it too. You might have remembered that. I don't know. But every time you say, I'm saying this stuff, I'm going, oh yeah, that's helpful. So I've gone contact myself tonight. It was very helpful. So thank you, everybody. We delight in our effort to be better human beings for our sake and the sake of others. For our sake. We forget that in the West. For our own sake. This is the method for me to get happy, to have more positive thoughts. That's the method for me to be happy. Buddha's first stages of practice are about me getting happy. Then we can help others. That comes later. Got to remember this. We must remember this. So may bodhicitta, may compassion grow and grow in the hearts of all. Chang chob sem chogram poche ma ke panam ke guchi ke panyam pa me pa yang gong ne gondu paba shok. All right, everybody. That's it. Then just Patty. Keep it simple, Patty. Thank you, darling people. See you all. Happy to see you all. Happy to see you all. Keep moving. Never give up. Never give up. Never give up. And give your arm a rest. And I hope your fingers heal. You're going to heal properly and be back on the violin.